So if you start with chapter 2, the problem is you're a sinner and someone needs to pay for that sin. What's going to happen? Oh, Jesus did it, and then you're done. But if you start with chapter 1, the problem is how can I get back to wholeness with God and with each other?
Leaving us a head full of vital truths about God. And here's the line. And a body unable to fend off sin. I think that gospel presentation still leaves us with a body that is unable to fend off sin.
We're all affected by sin done by us, sin done to us, but then also sin done around us.
What is the gospel? That's what we're going to talk about today. Gospel simplicity. Hi, Caleb. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Do you like being called Pastor Caleb or Caleb? Do you have a preference?
We can get into that. I don't like being called
I think
Pastor
it's a fun
Caleb.
thing. Oh, you don't like it. No. So I appreciate it,
Yeah.
but I don't feel like it's right for me to tell people you need to call me pastor. But when someone does, I go, oh, that was kind.
The reason somebody asked me that, I won't say who, but somebody asked me like a year ago why I don't call myself pastor. And the two reasons I gave, there's one good one that I think is good and one bad. The bad one is I'm insecure, and it feels, it kind of calls like what's the phrase? The imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So I don't like that. But then the second reason I think is good is in Matthew 23, Jesus says, don't let anyone call you rabbi, that kind of thing. So I don't want to get to the point where I'm expecting that kind of respect from people.
Yeah.
Especially my age. I acknowledge I'm young, and that doesn't mean I can't pastor.
You're not as young anymore.
Easy.
We should pull up the photo of your first day picture.
Yeah, that was rough. I think I look exactly the same, just maybe 10 pounds heavier in the face. But yeah, it's a weird, I don't like it.
I guess I have seen a correlation between people who honor that position and say pastor is sometimes is a picture of someone who is willing to like receive that kind of authority in their life, which I think is needed. Kind of what we talked about last week's podcast. Sometimes that familiarity is not the best thing for people's soul.
Yeah.
So that's when I see the advantage of like, yeah, you should probably call me that, you know. I also think it's great when parents teach their kids to call, because there's like a difference there. Like, hey, call him Pastor Trey instead of, hey, buddy, you know, like,
yeah.
Hey, 5-year-old kid, I'm not your buddy.
Right.
But I do see way more unhealthy other direction where it's like, you have to call me pastor, as you're saying, right?
Yeah,
That can get really bad. Matthew 23 is very convicting.
Yes.
Don't call me. Yeah.
You have one rabbi.
Yeah.
And it's Jesus. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And we're just servants. So most of the mentors in my life have not cared. Like, just call me by my name. But it's still so hard. A lot of them I still call doctor, whatever. Like, they insist, but I'm like, I insist.
Right.
I want people in my life where I feel like I need to approach you in that kind of honor, and not just, I don't always want just buddies with everybody. Okay. We didn't plan that.
It's good.
What is the gospel? Okay, we're talking about, I thought this was a good way to end our simplicity practice. So we started with digital simplicity, which I think really moved a lot of people because I think it affects all of us. Material simplicity is a little bit of a harder sell because it just is, consumerism is the air that we breathe. And it's also a great way to be misunderstood. Again, I love the Dallas Willard line. I actually got it from rereading this book, Spirit of the Disciplines, but I read it after preaching the materialism sermon. But he says, at the end of the day, being poor is a poor way to help the poor. And I was like, that's a great line, you know? So there is a balance here, but over obsessing, over trusting all day. Materialism is not the way to the good life. And most of us have way too much clutter. I'm not going to re-preach that. But then we had another one, relational simplicity. So now we got to start thinking about our mouths and what we speak and what we don't speak. And I thought, man, I don't want to heap one more thing on what people have to do or not do or whatever. So like, let's remind ourselves the whole heart behind this, gospel simplicity. So the definition of simplicity, our working definition, is the practice of removing the number of digital distractions, material desires, and relational dishonesties that keep us from living a joyful life in the kingdom with Jesus. So a joyful life in the kingdom with Jesus, I think, might be a very simple way to explain the gospel. What's missing there?
Sin.
No,
I don't know. Yeah, it depends on your definition of the gospel. So if your definition of the gospel is what you had said, if the gospel is reduced to just you're a sinner deserving hell, believe in Jesus and you'll go to heaven when you die, then simplicity doesn't really matter, because nothing you do in this life makes a difference. You can accumulate all the stuff that you want. It doesn't matter because you intellectually believe that Jesus died for your sins. So your eternal security is there. Your eternity is secured. Your future is there. But if an element of the gospel, a core element, involves not just the kingdom, but our joyful participation in the kingdom, then that changes what salvation means. And that changes what it means to believe in Jesus, which includes joy and kingdom living. And then it has to include simplicity. So yeah, like implicit in that definition is like, we are sinners, so that's the first thing that prevents us from experiencing joy in the kingdom. But even beyond our sin, there's just the ongoing corruption of sin. Like sin doesn't stop once you get saved. So how you deal with that, I think, involves simplicity. How you live your life relationally with others, how you deal with your attention, your whole body. Like I think of how Paul defines worship is essentially giving your whole body to God.
Romans 12:1.
Romans 12:1. Which involves simplicity. So like that, if that's the gospel, then that, yeah.
I like the idea, you know, in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul talks about salvation in 3 different tenses, right? In which you were saved, being saved, and will be saved. And I think we're in a cultural moment. Cultural Christianity is all about that past tense. Were you saved?
Yeah.
But it is past, present, and future. That's why I like living a joyful life in the kingdom with Jesus shows, what is that, imperfect tense, right? It's that constant, it's not a constant am I in or am I out, but it's salvation is not transaction as much as it's transformation. And the beauty is that transformation is an ongoing process. It's that difference between perfect in the Greek concept versus the Hebrew, right? The Greek concept is like you ace the test, you got nothing wrong.
Legal standing, you're in or you're out. In Hebrew, it's more about wholeness. It's shalom. It's returning to Eden. It's being one. The line from, I think it's Soren Kierkegaard, the saint is the one who's able to will the one thing. It's the return to like all your wills and desires are aimed at one thing. So if salvation is perfection or whatever is that, then that makes more sense.
And the Greek sense of perfection, I get why heaven can seem boring to people, because when you understand this sense of glorification is you're now perfect, there's now no room to grow. You're and I love Dallas Willard again talks about, well, I think in heaven you're continuing the process that you began here on earth of that
sanctification.
You know, like, you know, I know, of course, there's a different element, like we are wholly sanctified when we're in his presence, but there's also this beauty, like we saw in the Garden of Eden, of potential, right? Like of growth, of expanding, of ruling and reign, not just sitting on a cloud, I did everything.
Yeah, it's hard because I think that Dallas Willard's idea of like when we're in heaven or in the presence of God or in the new creation, and this gets into weird eschatology, like heaven, we would say, according to the scriptures, is a temporary place. It's not our permanent place. When we die and go to heaven, that's not where we are forever. We're one day going to be in the new creation, which is not heaven. It's the unification of heaven and earth together fully. So when we're in heaven in the temporary space, are we made perfect then? Or are we made perfect when heaven and earth unite in the new creation?
And again, the question is perfect legally, or, you know, like, are we talking Greek concept or Hebrew concept here? I think we just confused a lot of people.
Yeah, everyone's checked out by now. This is just us having a good, this is like our staff. This is our staff meeting.
Yeah.
Really. I don't know.
Sorry to throw that wrench in the plan in that, but I don't know. To me, I do think that we have to remember the Hebrew concept of perfection, of shalom, versus the Greek concept.
Yeah, even in the New Testament, when a lot of times when you see Jesus healing or Jesus saving, those are the same words. It's the Greek word sozo, where we get soteriology, which is the doctrine of salvation. How do you get saved? So in the Gospels, Jesus saving and Jesus healing, like salvation is healing. Those words are interchangeable.
Like that root word salve.
Yeah, salve. It's where we get, like a salve is like a healing balm or something like that. So salvation can't just be you are declared righteous. It is that. It is certainly that.
Right.
I'm not saying it's less. I'm saying it's actually more than that, in that it has to involve healing. And I think our trouble is we've to use Reformed language, if you're familiar with this, we're justified. That means we're made righteous. Like the minute we are made,
courtroom analogy,
the Holy Spirit, we're made regenerate. We're made new. The moment our old self dies and our new self is born by the power of the Holy Spirit, we do nothing to earn that.
Amen.
But sanctification is the process of us being made perfect, holy, whole, like God. And Scripture is very clear that is something that we do participate in.
Yeah.
And so like
with fear and trembling.
With fear and trembling, yeah. Philippians 2, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. We've separated those things theologically, and then we've kind of taught that, but I don't think experientially those two things can be separated. So the minute that you're justified or declared righteous, or that you receive new life, or you decide to follow Jesus, or whatever language you want to use, at that moment you are participating in your own sanctification, or you are participating, willing yourself to be formed into the image of Jesus. It's all... And that is salvation.
This is a good example of what we're trying to point out. Simplicity is not the opposite of complexity. It's the opposite of superficiality, right? So we started the message saying, in an effort to make the gospel simple, we've made the gospel superficial.
Yeah.
If we boil it down to you're a sinner, Jesus died for your sin, believe you can go to heaven, it creates a superficial version of, it creates people who think, I don't need to pursue kingdom living while I'm here on earth. I don't need to pursue in Queen Creek as it is in heaven, right? There's a lot that gets stripped away because we think we've made the gospel simple. But simplicity, I think in my mind, simplicity means there's one aim, but it still leaves a lot of room for paradox, for long conversations. Like, I do think there's a way to share the gospel to somebody in 1 minute and have them get saved.
Do it.
But I also believe it's probably not the most helpful.
Yeah.
And I think also declaring, again, salvation, not as much as a 1 moment transaction, but an ongoing transformation, which is so hard for our brains to fathom because it's been beaten in our head for so long. To me, that is really entering into life and life in abundance that Jesus has to offer. I think you can, remember Creative Minority by John Tyson. He talks about, we often share, I think I put it in my book, Non-Anxious Pastor, a chapter 2+3 gospel. Because chapter 2, right, if those who are unfamiliar, the 4 chapters of the gospel, creation, fall, redemption, restoration. We're all over the place, aren't we?
This is going to be by far the most confusing podcast.
I'm so sorry, but I'm trying to bring some clarity here.
Yeah.
So creation, I think it's first and foremost, it's really important to talk about we are made in the image of God, right? Like we need to talk about Eden before the fall. And that's what we were created for. And then he's a holy, righteous creator, but he is also community. He is 3 in 1, and he is full of, he is love, as we learn, right? So that's in the creation narrative. We have to start there. So if you immediately start with you're a sinner, you're still missing, you jump to chapter 2. And I think chapter 2, it's a bigger punch when you've heard and understood chapter 1. To see what we did have and see what we are created for.
Yeah.
When we just start with chapter 2, you're trash. You're the worst thing ever, but there's a way out. So chapter 1 and then 2 sees what I was made for, but then my own sinful desires, the systems of the world. I am born of Adam, right? I am in this curse of sin. I am now not living what I was designed to live because of sin done by me, sin done to me, sin done around me. Then I hear there is chapter 3, this Redeemer who has come to make all things right, who is fully God, fully man, lived the perfect life, modeled kingdom living. Like he was offering salvation before he went to the cross, right? Like enter the kingdom. The kingdom is here now, but it got solidified and he conquered sin, Satan, and death when he died on the cross and rose again on the 3rd day. And then he ascended, which is still so important part of the gospel, and he's coming back again. So chapters 1, 2, 3, and then 4, now it's the call to the church to restore not just our own personal, but our communities, the nations, every tribe, tongue, and nation. So when we don't do, and I wish I could pull my book out because I feel like I explained it pretty well, but the chapters 1 and 4 gospel is like a social gospel where it's God loves all of us and we need to make this world better. It's like, yeah, but you haven't really addressed the part of sin and how only Jesus can redeem us. But then just the chapter 2 and 3 is a very individual gospel, very transactional, not seeing the whole nature, Am I making any sense here?
Yeah. If you start with chapter 2, which is you're a sinner, then the problem is that you're a sinner. If that's the problem, then your solution is, how do I become not a sinner?
How do I get better?
How do I get my sin paid for? Which is, I think, what a lot of us have done. But if you start with chapter 1, which is you were created for wholeness with God and with each other, then that's the problem. The answer to the problem is, how do I get back to wholeness with God and with each other? Mm-hmm. And if you start with chapter 1, then you get, I think, the full gospel, which is we are being the trajectory of the human soul that's been saved and redeemed by Jesus isn't just legal transaction, but it's transformation into a unified wholeness in your relationship with God and your relationship with others. So if you start with chapter 2, the problem is you're a sinner and someone needs to pay for that sin. What's going to happen? Oh, Jesus did it, and then you're done. But if you start with chapter 1, the problem is how can I get back to wholeness with God and with each other? It's still through Jesus, who paid for your sin and brought you back to God, but he also brought you back to God for a purpose and with others, so that you can experience salvation today, not just in eternity.
A chapter 2 and 3 gospel creates a church that is focused on helping people make a decision. Mm-hmm. Chapters 1 through 4 gospel is a gospel. When the church preaches that, it helps people. It makes disciples. Make decisions versus make disciples. It's holistic, yes. Every corner of your life.
Yeah.
And that's why we even talked about in our growth track, you said it, hey, we have an agenda for your life, right? Like, we are calling you to be a disciple of Jesus. And so if that's what you want, you're going to feel great here. It's going to be awesome. You're going to be pushed, but you're going to know it's what you need. Mm-hmm. If you have no interest in becoming a disciple, eventually this is going to keep rubbing you the wrong way and you're going to want to bail, you know? Yeah. So we want to let you know now. We have grace. There's different stages and seasons of life. And there's times where it's like, we get it, man. We're not going to keep pressing the throttle in your life. Like, you just need whatever. But man, we got to be pursuing, because again, it's the whole idea. There's nothing neutral. Either we're becoming more like him or we're becoming more like our degenerated, deformed, sinful, like society, all of those things.
So then the question is, do I want to do this? Do I want to ask a question that I don't know if I can answer or that you can answer right now?
I'd ask that every week, but you always have an answer. So
the question is, what do you do? So let's say how do you get saved then? And if you get saved, what if you just never progress?
That's what's interesting about the Puritans. They would never baptize right away. They so this is what I've heard, right? And I don't know any Puritans myself, but I've read some stuff.
Yeah.
They so emphasized transformation. They go a few years in, oh yeah, you've been following the way with us. You want to get baptized?
Right.
Versus us, it's like, you've been here twice. Yeah. You've heard the gospel twice. Decision, let's dunk you.
Right.
And so there's an argument to be made. I see both sides of that, though, because it really isn't about earning. Like, if you have this step of faith, and you want to get baptized, let's do it. Am I totally taking this a different direction than what you were asking?
No, I don't know. Are you done with your answer? Because if so, yes. But if no, then
ask it again. There was a part of that question that I had thought of that I'm like, oh, I want to address that, but go again.
A better way to ask it would be, if salvation is about transformation, can you untransform yourself to the point of where you're no longer saved?
So you're asking about, so that's where I still am on, what's the doctrine? The perseverance of the saints.
Right.
I still believe
Once saved,
if God really changed the root, then you will always have the fruit. Mm. You know, you will know a tree by their fruit. And so I think there is a way to fake it in the beginning and act like you're saved, but really because God always looks at the heart.
Right.
There's a way to join a church community, say all the right things, get dunked, because you just want to feel welcomed. You want to feel loved by this friend group or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you can, in the flesh, look like a Christian for quite a while until stuff hits the fan, right? And so I would always argue there is a way where there is an ultimate unveiling, and it shows that you never were transformed. Mm-hmm. But over the long haul, the trajectory of your life, if you have received him, surrendered to him as your Lord, Savior, and Rabbi, you are going to be showing on a graph, there will be a transformation. But I think there also can be like a decade where it looks like you're not.
Yeah.
There's like a prodigal son season of life, right? And that's why they always say it's not up to, like, who are we to declare who's saved or not saved? But I do believe if you were, because Romans 8, what can separate us from the love of God, right? If we weren't the ones who saved ourselves, we can't be the ones that remove ourselves, you know?
Yeah. Cool.
That's it.
No, that makes sense. I think it's also, if you define salvation legally, then...
But this is what happens to some denominations who do make a bigger deal about living the disciple Christian life. They start to go, maybe perseverance of the saints isn't a thing.
Is that a core doctrine? Is that like a... I know that's one of the... It's
to being Baptist, absolutely.
Tulip, but to being Baptist, yeah. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Cool. On that note.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, but if salvation is just legal, then that temptation is really there. But if salvation is primarily relational, then I think perseverance of the saints makes the most sense. So
okay. And that's why Paul argues in Romans, should we just sin so that grace may abound?
Right.
Meganito, by no means.
Yeah.
Right. So he's saying you haven't truly understood grace if you just think, oh, I got my ticket.
Yeah, you're dead to sin. Sin doesn't hold you enslaved anymore. You have the capacity, maybe not the willingness, but the capacity, not the willingness all the time, but the capacity to overcome it and to make those small steps into what is ultimately perfection or wholeness or whatever.
And we think that formula towards that fully Christian life is being formed by Jesus together for others. You need all three. It's formed by Jesus, taking a practice like simplicity, putting it into your life, doing it in community, being encouraged by others, and doing it for the sake of another, right? Like, I'm going to simplify my life for the poor, right? So to love and serve the poor, or to love and serve my neighbor, or so more people can hear, right? Like it takes all of those.
And it's still legal. Like there is still a you're declared righteous. But I think our whole point is that the gospel, making the gospel simple is not reducing it to that. It's actually expanding it beyond that.
Yeah. So in chapter 1 of Richard Foster's book, he talks about how simplicity is complex. It's not simplism. And so he gives a bunch of things. He's like, simplicity is both a grace and a discipline. And just our minds can't get that.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, this is a grace. There's nothing to earn. It just boom. But also, yeah, it takes some effort. It's like, how do these two things go together? But they do. So, okay, let's transition a little. Okay, let me add one more point.
Yeah.
Our point on Sunday was look at Mark 10. I thought it was a really good juxtaposition that Mark does of the children. Hey, being childlike is how you enter the kingdom. And then looking at a Sunday school all-star, this guy, the rich young ruler, on all accounts, looks like he is the best.
Yes.
I want him to go to my church, So like he's young, so like he did well in life early. He's rich, which in that time meant you're favored by God. That's probably. Yeah. And also, we actually usually believe the opposite now. Rich is not good either. But he was like, he ran to the rabbi, he kneeled below, he called him rabbi, like he was willing to do all these things, but then he found the one thing that he wasn't going to let go of. And he's saying, and then he left in dismay and he's not going to enter the kingdom. Right. And so we said to live a joyful life in the kingdom of Jesus. I don't want to boil it down, but if we had to boil it down to one phrase, it's living a joyful life in the kingdom of Jesus is not about passing a test. It's about placing your trust. Now, of course, that conversation has to go, what are you placing your trust in? In Jesus. Who is Jesus? Well, he is fully God, right? So maybe it's the American part of us. We want to put everything down into one little tagline.
Yeah.
And it's something that's so significant. I think it's okay to have more than one little tagline. But I think there's a way a tagline can get you in. But man, there's still such a vastness to it. I had a professor tell me salvation is the door into the kingdom. The kingdom is so much larger. Like, don't just hang out at the door frame. Like, enter in, see what kingdom living is all about.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that. Let's talk about, you had a great outreach workshop a couple of years ago, and you talked about like the 3 different gospels. And I remember being in the audience going like, bro, he's bringing the heat. And I think some of these people are going to be ticked off.
Oh boy.
Did you feel that?
I thought about it beforehand a little bit, but it kind of got to the point where I was like, I was so confident in what I was writing that when I got up there, I was like, if I'm wrong, show me. Like
it was one of the perfect examples of if everyone just keeps listening, they're going to go, okay, got it.
Yes.
But you were like, boom, 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 and not giving the answer yet. You know, like not like, and don't worry. No, it was like, no, this isn't it. I thought it was amazing. I'll never forget that. I was so tense on your behalf.
I felt great. I felt great. By the time I got up there, I was like, this is good.
I wish more people attended that workshop. I thought it was incredible. So I don't know how much of an audience we'll reach here, but let's kind of go through a little bit of kind of what you did there, and we can kind of talk about it. Because again, the simplicity of the gospel, you're talking about what is the gospel. I don't even know if you want to include the secular gospel or if you want to just look at the American gospel versus the gospel's gospel. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, well, the secular gospel, so I talked about there are two false gospels that are all around us, and then there's one true gospel. And I think the secular gospel, and gospel just means good news, right? It's not a religious word. It was actually, the word is euangelion in Greek, and it was a political word. So like when a new king would come into town or when they'd want a war or something like that, they would send out messengers to evangelize, to proclaim the euangelion. And it was that Caesar is Lord, Caesar is ruling, Caesar is victorious or whatever. So when the gospel writers are proclaiming the good news, they're proclaiming the good news of something. Now we all believe in a gospel. That was my main point, is like we're believing in something. And most of the world, or the Western world, believes in the secular gospel, which we're all familiar with. And that is essentially, if you had to boil it down, it would be we need saving from the idea that we need saving. Yeah. So it's the secular sort of worldview, not religious, not spiritual in any way, would say that salvation is defined by freedom from oppression, and then having complete autonomy. So there's no one oppressing you, and you have the autonomy to kind of live your own life, make your own decisions, be who you want to be, define what goodness and value looks like to you.
And one way I have seen, and I think it's in your notes, so pardon me.
Yeah.
The saved from this idea of needing saving is we still feel this guilt though. And so now instead of projecting it on like, I have a problem, it's very common to say you need therapy. It's because of society around you or your parents. And so it's this idea that you're okay. It's just you've been harmed by others.
Right.
You know, so we don't need theologians, we need therapists.
Yeah, which is true. I mean, we are all wounded, right? We all carry sins done.
We say we're wicked and wounded.
Wicked and wounded. I think it was, I want to say it was Gary Breshears. I don't know if if it was him or another professor who said that we're all affected by sin done by us, sin done to us, but then also sin done around us.
I just said that like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember who it was from, but yeah, absolutely. I think it is Gary.
Yeah. So there's a part of that that's true, but it doesn't stop there. And if you're following the secular gospel and your salvation is about freedom of expression and individual satisfaction and autonomy from oppression, then you're never going to find it. That's the hard thing, is like you will always be enslaved to maybe not the systems of the world, but you'll be enslaved to yourself. And you're a cruel master, right? Like you will never live up to your own expectations. Satisfied. Yeah. You're never satisfied. All of those things.
Salvation means we need a scapegoat. And in Christ, we have Christ. He is our scapegoat, which we get from Leviticus, right? Putting it on the goat and running out. But in society today, we still inherently know we need a scapegoat, which is why we have cancel culture. It's why we have our parents did this to us or this political party, right? We're still throwing we're throwing all of this on other people, trying to get a scapegoat so that we feel like we're now living in freedom.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that feels appealing. Like it sounds great on the surface. But everything that we're striving for just fails us. And so then we have, unless there's anything you just want to add to that. I mean, there's tons of notes here. Just go listen to the workshop. I don't know. It's on YouTube, right?
Is it still on our Passion Creek page?
I don't do that stuff.
Okay, keep talking. I'm going to search that, and then we'll link it in the description of this episode if I can find it.
Almost as an overreaction on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have what I call the American gospel. And so this, again, was an overreaction to secularism. And it's the gospel that many of us have grown up with. And I would still categorize this as a false or an incomplete
You were straight up looking at the camera. Preach that gospel.
Yeah, no, here we go. And the American gospel says this: we need saving from an eternal life in hell, and salvation is living in heaven forever when we die. And so our outreach, and you mentioned this on Sunday, looked like this. You talk to people and you say, you're a sinner and you deserve hell, but God loves you, so Jesus died on the cross for you. If you believe in Jesus, you'll go to heaven when you die instead of hell. And that's kind of the pitch. And it was really popular, made popular after World War II for a lot of different reasons. And there were a lot of really great things about it. It highlighted like personal responsibility. Like you can't just blame all your issues and your sin on other people or oppression or whatever. Like you have to take responsibility. You have to make the decision, the individual decision to follow Jesus. And then if you know, hell is a reality that we want to save people from. So it drove people, that simplified version of the gospel drove people to share the good news, to go and do mission trips and things like that. And there's been a lot of good that's come from that as well. And so the popular evangelism question of this gospel is, if you were to die tonight, where would you go? Mm-hmm. Heaven or hell? And
not, what if you had to wake up tomorrow morning and you still have to live this life?
Right.
How are you living it?
Yeah, exactly. And then this is where we get the high emphasis on justification by faith. Like that is the gospel, is you've been justified before God. And so I believe all that's true. Like all of that in the American gospel, I believe is true. I would just argue that that's really incomplete, which is what you talked about yesterday. And it's what I talked about in the workshop. And it really only works when people care about being good and going to heaven and all of that. It doesn't, like, that's not a compelling way to share the gospel if the world doesn't accept something like an afterlife, or, you know, people aren't concerned about their eternity. Like you said, they're concerned about their tomorrow. So the gospel has to include good news, not just for what happens after you die, but it has to include good news before you get there. Like something that it has to involve your life until death. Yeah.
Dallas Willard in on page 152, The Spirit of the Discipline, says, one of the greatest deceptions in the practice of the Christian religion is the idea that all that really matters is our internal feelings, ideas, beliefs, and intentions. Mm-hmm. It is this mistake about the psychology of the human being that more than anything else divorces salvation from life. And I guess that's a great way to bundle it up. Now, again, I'm a product of that kind of gospel. I'm fourth generation, and to my knowledge, that's what they would preach the most, and I see a lot of benefit from it. But what happens, it eventually gets watered down, especially in the wrong hands. It divorces salvation from life, right? Mm-hmm. And so he says, leaving us a head full of vital truths about God, and here's the line, and a body unable to fend off sin. Mm. I think that gospel presentation still leaves us with a body that is unable to fend off sin.
Yeah.
And we have just grown to say, well, we're not perfect. This is just who we are. This is the life we live, but at least we have heaven.
Yeah. It's what John Tyson calls conversionism, right? It's all about, how do you know someone's saved? Well, they have to believe the right things intellectually. And we've talked about this on earlier episodes of our podcast too. Like, that's not what belief in the Gospels mean. Faith, pistos in the Greek, means your behaviors, loyalty, trust. Some scholars say that's a better word to use, is trust, which means like your whole self, not just your mind, but the way
certainly a part of your mind. It is your mind.
Totally. It's not less than doctrine, but it's so much more, because what you truly believe is what you live out.
Do you see how this can, when we start, it sounds like we're heaping. It sounds like we're adding.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like what we're saying is harder, but it's really not. It's, maybe you can answer that, but we actually think that this superficial version of the gospel is not the easy yoke. Mm-hmm. That it gives the promises, but it under-delivers.
Yeah.
Because you still have a body that's unable to fend off sin.
Yeah. And so that, like, I think that's a good thing you bring that up, because we think the default is then to just live a simpler life. Don't worry about this stuff. Just believe in Jesus intellectually and just hope it pans out. You know, you have your one-way ticket to heaven, and that's good for all eternity. But the problem is like, your life until then is not an easy yoke. That's like, did you just say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Anyways.
No, keep going.
No, I'm just saying it's not like that. That is not a good alternative. And if you live that life long enough, because this is what Dallas Willard calls the gospel of sin management, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's your life, you become so obsessed with like forcing yourself to buckle down, try harder. God becomes a judge and not a father.
True.
Which he is still. He's both, and we only have a category.
We are just walking on some coals.
I know, we're on a tightrope. We have a category for one of those at a time, and we usually lean towards judge, and that's just not the right way to live. And so when Jesus comes and he says, the person who's like a child enters the kingdom, or when he says things like, just leave your stuff and follow me, mm-hmm. It sounds burdensome, but it's actually the most freeing thing that you can possibly do. It sounds like work, and it probably was a little bit of work for the rich young ruler to leave all of his possessions, to sell them and give them to the poor. But just on the other side of that is freedom like he's never experienced before. Because with that, you get freedom from the secular gospel, right? You don't have to work your way out of oppression. God's done that for you. But you also work your way out of the American gospel, in that it's not just about hell or heaven. It's about life now, today. Heaven has entered the world today, and you can access that type of freedom, or what Jesus calls life and life in abundance now, not just when you die. And then when you die...
And usually that freedom is from a bodily act. Like for him, it was to literally sell his stuff. It's a part of living out, walking, but trusting.
Right. Yeah. Your relationships are restored. And if they're not restored, then you don't carry the burden of trying to restore them. You can live simply relationally with others because you have a simple relationship with God, because you've cast your cares on him. You've sought the kingdom above all the other stuff, above the gospel of sin management, above seeking freedom from oppression and all of that. And so the invitation to Jesus is to lay those things down, which is an act of trust, but that's what repentance is. So when he says repent and believe, that means repent. Metanoia is the Greek word. It means change, like reorient your life.
Your mental maps of reality.
Yeah, your mental maps, how you perceive the world. Reorient everything about your life towards Jesus, and then believe. Live as if this is really true. Like live as if Jesus is the ultimate ruler and authority of the world, not the president or Caesar or Nero or whatever. Orient your life, practice the way of Jesus, and that's how you find life in the kingdom.
And I guess the overwhelming part is this thought of someone who doesn't believe in Jesus or just started. It gets overwhelming because it's like, I have a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And I think the invitation is, okay, but what is the next step? What is the Holy Spirit leading you to let go of today? I get overwhelmed thinking about all the stuff I still have to transform into his image. And that starts to heap condemnation, which misses the plot line, which is why we say it's not about trying to perform for Jesus, that leads to death, but training to be formed by Jesus leads to life. And so it's having this grace of knowing Jesus knows right where you're at. And he knows there's a million things, but that's the beauty of the Christian life. There's a lot more letting go that I'm going to have to do in my future. There's a lot more dying to self, but there is a way to die to myself today.
Yeah.
There is a 1 step to, 5 max, whatever. I'm not going to quantify, but that's the other part. And that's what's hard about preaching. You're preaching to a vast amount of people that have different steps. Like we can talk about material simplicity. It looks different for every single person, right? Like some of them, you just got to get debt free from your student loans. Like this is your takeaway. Yeah. Other people, you have abundance and now you're still worried. Like, no, you just got to give away some of your stuff and remember what it means to lean on the Lord and trust in him. Some of you need to work more. You don't make enough money because you're lazy, right? Yeah. There's so many different, but that's where it's like takes mentorship, but it takes the Holy Spirit to go, okay, I'm overwhelmed here, but what is my 1 step today? And that's where I feel like the burden sometimes of formation is we want to paint this picture of the good life and show somebody who's really done it. But then we see how far away we are from that, and maybe we can get discouraged from that. So no, there is just 1 step for most of us. Take it and see what the next step, the next day looks like.
Yeah. And that's why I think the invitation of Jesus is always to trust. Like that's the first step. That's the North Star. That's the guiding light. That's the point that we're aiming for is what am I? And even now, I talk to the most mature Christian that your 80-year-old grandma that's been following Jesus and just lives like the most joyful life in the kingdom you can imagine. And she will still have elements of her life that she has not trusted to Jesus. And so that is a lifelong process. But I ended with, we have the secular gospel, the American gospel.
Okay. One more thing. And then I want you to take this home. Okay.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add one more thing about the American gospel. So I'm reading a book called The Great Dechurching. Have you heard about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm reading it. It's really fascinating. What's fascinating, so there has been 3 major shifts, religious participation shifts in American history. It was the First Great Awakening, which was pre-1776. It was like 1740s or something. The Second Great Awakening, which is like 1810 to 1840. And then the right after, they don't have a phrase for it, but it's after the Civil War, there was this huge shift. But now, like the greatest shift we're in the middle of, in the last 25 years, 40 million Christians are no longer participating in church. That's larger than the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, and all the Billy Graham crusades combined of those people starting to come to church. we have it even worse now. It's a bigger number, 40 million, of no longer going to church.
Yeah.
And we know, I get so tired of that conversation. You know, it's not about the building. It's not, you know, we are the church, yada, yada. Yeah. But I think it's a woeful misunderstanding of the scriptures if you can somehow live out this faith alone, right? You need to live it in community, on mission together. It doesn't have to look like, you know, it could be a house church, whatever, but there's still like this thing called the church that Jesus died for and sent us out to do. And so that just shows, to me, I think it's it's a byproduct of sharing an American gospel, making it so individual, not talking about the kingdom, not talking about dying to self.
Right.
All of these things has led to the greatest de-churching movement in American history. So we're dealing with the consequences of that sort of presentation of the good news.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the American gospel says, you don't need to die to self. Jesus died for you.
Right.
Which is true, but that's a completely, like Jesus says, deny yourself, take up your cross. And that's not like oh, that was then and this is now. That's part of the invitation. That's what it means to repent.
Yeah.
Is to deny yourself. So the price has been paid, but there's still a cost, right?
Yeah.
And so the only thing I don't have much more, but I just defined the true biblical gospel as this. We need saving from the corruption of sin in our souls. So that's what carries on into eternity. That's what makes hell, hell. Whatever you believe about hell, that's what makes it's exclusion from the kingdom because of your sin. And so salvation isn't just the legal declaration of your sin being pardoned, but it's the healing of sin in your souls by experiencing life with God now and into eternity.
I loved your 3 invitations. You said it's healing, not just saving. And so part of discipleship is bringing up your wounds, allowing God to meet you there. Your vision of God's love determines the version of your life kind of thing, right? Like allow him to heal you and to love you. You said the invitation is to participate in Jesus's life, not just reflect on his death. So it's things like...
I wrote that?
Yeah. So it's things like the Sermon on the Mount. You know, like, oh, I'm actually supposed to live this and participate in it. Dallas Willard makes constant emphasis saying when we talk about the gospel, we go straight to, you know, where it's Matthew 26, where he dies.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the gospel is his life, his death, and his life after death, right? And then the third invitation you said is heaven is here and now, not just after death. And so what is heaven? Heaven is the presence of God bringing shalom here on earth. Right. And so we actually get to participate in bringing heaven here on earth. What is Jesus's prayer when he tells us how to pray? What's the first line? Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Yeah, right.
I have to say it in order because
your kingdom come, your will be done
on earth as it is.
Yeah. And so when we say, this is not saying we figured everything out, but there is, we have created a superficial gospel. And I remember when I was like in 7th grade, when God just totally grabbed my heart and I was reading my Bible, I remember getting really nervous because I'm like, I don't see the ABCs like in Romans, you know, like in one little sitting.
Right.
Like I can see elements of that. And, you know, I'm not saying, again, absolutely need to admit, absolutely need to believe, you need to confess. But I got nervous that like, man, I've been presented like it's just a short one line. And I don't see, like, whenever Peter would preach the gospel, he'd talk about Israel. And then he would, you know, there's so much. It's this kingdom narrative that is a lot larger than the individual, you're going to be floating in heaven for forever kind of presentation that we're used to hearing.
And that's why, that was the whole point of the workshop too, was to say, if you're going to preach the gospel, it has to be compelling enough to show that it's something that you participate in now. It's about healing. It's not just saving. Jesus' life matters. Like we read the Sermon on the Mount as if it mattered today. And we participate in heaven. We reflect the goodness of God's creation to the world around us. In a world that is so broken and evil because of human wickedness and sinfulness, we show what's really possible from a life with God, not just in eternity, but here on earth.
So one thing I was going to add on my sermon, and then I took it away because I wanted it to be kind of shorter this week, is this line where leaving everything to follow Jesus removes the curse of sin, or maybe even the language you were just using in your workshop, leaving everything to follow Jesus removes the corruption of sin, but not the cost of following him. And I think we just assume it just removes everything, including our responsibility, including like a life of actually following. And so, no, it actually costs a lot to follow him. And I love that about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He argues he calls it cheap grace. Right. So when we talk about superficial gospel, kind of borrowing from him when he says we've turned it in. This whole conversation has been about cheap grace versus costly grace, right? And so you really have to let go of everything to follow him. And for Bonhoeffer, he literally died, right? Opposing, because I think for him, he had a kingdom narrative of it's not just me and personal. No, my homeland, Germany, is doing terrible things. I need to fight against the system.
The propaganda of nationalism and all of that.
Yes, not just, I showed video of you going like that. I didn't switch over to me. Over half of your faces, it's usually not caught. You didn't know this time. So, but Bonhoeffer, it did cost him his life.
Yeah.
And I remember in college learning this. So I had to read Cost of Discipleship in my Jeff Lewis class. And Jeff Lewis was the one who actually helped mentor David Platt. He started the Passion Movement with Louis Giglio, and he blew my mind every week and made me think, should I be in ministry? But he's also the one that talked about the kingdom. And he gave me a book. It's called The Gospel of the Kingdom by George Ladd. Have you ever heard of it? Listen to here. It talks about Luke 19 and how it actually is referencing King Herod's son.
Nice.
We have more proof.
Vindication.
About Luke 19, what we had talked about a couple episodes ago. I was so excited about that as I read it this week. And he's the one who argues kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, salvation, eternal life. Those are all interchangeable phrases that you see throughout. It's a really helpful book. So there's a cost to still following him because this is a new kingdom. Like we have to follow him as our king and we have things to do. But I love how Dallas Willard flips the script and says, yes, there is a cost to following him and we all need to know it. I mean, Dallas Willard's all about that. Like grace is not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. There's some stuff you got to do. Yeah. But he flips the script by saying, but there is a greater cost of non-discipleship. There's even more pain, more suffering, more. We just don't connect the dots that the type of life we are living is why we are living and the type of life we're in.
Where, and it's almost like you don't realize what life could look like because for a lot of reasons. One of them is the gospel we've been hearing is not compelling. It's not a good enough alternative.
Or the one we've been seeing.
Or the one
right?
we've been seeing,
that you and I are called to live out. Paul says to Timothy, watch your life and your doctrine closely.
Yes, we see hypocrisy in the church. We see leaders not living out what they believe. The Sermon on the Mount is optional, all of that stuff. And that's not compelling at all. So when we are living, it's that story of, who tells the story of the fish in the water? You know what I'm talking about? I'm blanking on his name.
I feel like it's such an old parable that who knows who started
who said it. Yeah, it's two fish are swimming in the ocean, and an older fish comes and he says, "Hey, this water's great, isn't it?" And the two fish say, "What the heck is water?" Like they don't even know. They don't have the self-awareness to see outside of their what you call mental maps or the imminent frame as some.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, all right.
What's his name? The imminent frame guy, Charles Taylor.
Charles Taylor calls it the imminent frame.
That means we just got real nerdy.
Yeah, I don't even know I'm on a podcast now. I'm just kind of talking. That's why I leaned back from the mic. I'm just talking. Yeah, you don't know what hell looks like until you see heaven, right? And so like there's an element of like hell that exists here on earth, and it's people, and it's you not following the way of Jesus and reaping the destruction of that. And sometimes it is destruction, and it feels like suffering and tragedy and pain, and other times it just feels like boredom, monotony, and like something's missing. And so when Jesus breaks through with the kingdom, it's the invitation to experience life as it was meant to be lived, which is not all fun and games. It's hard. It's self-denial, but it's a deeper piece that subverts the hell that you were living in and the cheap satisfaction that your old life was giving you.
And there's a complexity to this argument, of course, but I wish secular culture would see how they're living and then how many of them deal with mental health and anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts. And of course, you can be following the way, doing all those things. There's a lot of other things that happen, right? But also, I know a lot of people, it's like, dude, you just don't have basic life skills. And you're blaming it just on the world. It's like, no, like you really do need to add some discipline to your life, and you'd be shocked. Like step one, work out, but we don't connect those dots that maybe this way of life is what's causing this life of death, And so I think that's why in our practice series, but also just sermons in general, I think some people argue maybe that we're not as evangelistic as we could be, especially we're in the Baptist denomination. Totally. And so like everything is typically, ended every week with the cross, have them come forward. I would say this is actually why for you and me, for me and you, I should probably say, this is why when we preach, we start with the problem, with the ache. What we're doing is evangelizing. We're convincing the person in the room, hey, this way of life that all of us accepted, it's bad, like the digital world. And we spent 15 minutes talking about how it's destroying us, destroying each other. It gets to the point of, is there an answer? And then we go, and let's look at the way of Jesus, right? You've heard it said, but let me say to you. And so the way we evangelize is our job is to go, look at this water, right?
Yeah, the fish.
Yeah, like we're in water right now. Oh, we are? Yeah, but guess what? There's a way out. Let's say we're not fish, we're humans. That's why we're drowning. This thing's called water, but there is air. But I think we're in a cultural moment where, if we just start with, okay, I'm going to read the scripture. This is where we're going to get in trouble.
Yep.
I'm just going to read. You're like, yeah, this is where we're going to get in trouble. Yeah. Just start here. And I think for 70% of our people, that's fine. Yeah, you just start there. But what we're trying to do is, don't you realize this way of life is bad? This way of life leads to destruction, the world. Now let's look at the book. Right. It creates a hunger. Is there another solution? Because then we acknowledge, man, people are saying this is the right way. But let's, you and I both know it's not. What about this? No. But Jesus really is the way.
Yeah. And that's what Jesus did too. Like Jesus, Jesus didn't, nowhere in scripture does it teach you how to preach. So I
guess I brought that up because this morning I was listening to someone talk about how you need to start, like your first 10 minutes is just a line by line of the book.
Yeah. Which we do in our sermons.
Yeah.
We do that.
We just do it in a different spot.
Yeah. We push it like 5 minutes to get their attention.
Yeah.
Show them why they need this and then give them the salve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That way we're not canceled. No, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just think in our cultural moment, we need to convince them first because they're like, who is this word?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why should I trust this?
It used to be...
we have to show you can't trust all the other stuff first.
Yeah. You have to show that... and this is... People have said this. The Gospel Coalition even said this in an article recently, that you have to... The role of apologetics is to show that first, you have to make people want the gospel to be true. And that has to involve them realizing that they need... Like the woman at the well was thirsty before Jesus offered her the water that would never make her thirst again. Like she didn't know what that meant, but it was still like acknowledging the need, showing people that the way of life you're living now is not as good as it can be, or even as God intended it to be. And it's not just, and I think some people would agree with us and say, yeah, we need to show them that they're sinners and they're going to hell. It's like, that's true, but first of all, how do you define hell? It's not just, scripture clearly says that there's some element of it that exists here now.
James 3 says like we're unleashing hell with our tongues.
Yeah, we can do that against other people. So showing people not just like you deserve God's wrath, but like you are suffering the consequences of your own decisions now, and it's not leading you to life and life in abundance, but there is a way. And it's not just about going to heaven when you die. It's about healing for your entire body, your souls, all of that, starting now and into eternity. Yeah.
Yeah, we can go on forever. I think you actually need to go soon. So
soonish, yeah.
This is I feel like we're hitting our groove as far as some of these conversations.
And then we stop for like 2 months, and then I feel like I come back and I forget how to do it.
Remember, we're going to start doing this every week now. That's a good intro. So we're going to be going into the book of James now. And so the tagline for James, as we study this for 9 weeks, is putting simplicity into practice. And so we're admittedly going through James in 9 weeks. That could take 3 months. So whatever we don't cover, we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
And then just also still bringing up some stories. We're going to be interviewing people. How is simplicity working? How are you working it into the everyday goings of your life?
Yeah.
Anything else you need to add?
Nope.
We sure got ourselves in trouble today.
Maybe. I don't know.
We believe in everything that we just said. Right?
Yeah.
Just messing. All right, cool. Grace and peace, guys. Thank you for watching.